What's up, Klamath Falls? This is Mike.
What's up, Klamath Falls? This is Dave. And with us today, once again, we have Andrew Nichols with us. So, welcome to the show.
Thank you. And what's up, Klamath Falls?
And thanks for coming back.
Yeah, absolutely.
Our first repeat guest. So that's pretty cool.
I'm honored.
We are too. In all honesty. Yeah, thanks for being here. So, did you have there's a lot going on. And as with most elections, it seems like wires get crossed, stories get misconstrued, and God forbid that your yard sign ends up next to somebody else's yard. And I don't know. I just it's frustrating to see it on a national level, and we're seeing it more and more. It seems on a local level too, through what you're going through.
Yeah, and I spent my entire adult life protecting our founding documents and the things that give us our freedoms. And frankly, whoever wants to put a yard sign in their yard, that's their right, and that's what I did. So people can continue to have that right.
Yeah. Um, it, it's just and we touched on this in a previous, I think it was last week's episode, but I don't care. You have a right to vote for whoever you want to have a right to vote for, and if there are two different parties or whatever, whether I agree or disagree with that isn't really the point. The point is that person has a right to endorse or promote or whoever they want, but there shouldn't be comparisons made between those two candidates just as a casual observation.
Absolutely. We can, within this commissioner race alone, you can look at all kinds of yards and businesses around town. And you might see one candidate for commissioner and another candidate for sheriff, and the next yard or business you see the opposite. And people, like you said, they make their own choices, and that's a deeply personal thing. And I don't think it is a reflection on the candidate at all about whose yard sign theirs is next to.
Right. Well, and then I don't know. There's other things that I see. You try to send. You sent a very gracious letter into the Herald and News, and they refused to print that.
I didn't get a response back from them. I mean, letters that I've sent in have not been printed. I don't know why. If I maybe didn't do some formatting right, you think that they would at least respond and say, hey, change it this way or that way. But no, it was a nothing from.
Just a little constructive criticism.
Yeah, which I would have been fine with that, and I wish they would still use the letters to the editor as
Yeah.
a place for civics and where people can talk back and forth, especially during election cycles, and give some thoughtful content. But haven't seen that in our paper lately.
That's it seems to be going away, not just here, but in general, is honest, open dialogue without everybody gets their feelings hurt, and then you can't talk about that anymore. And hurt feelings sometimes are what creates progress, in my opinion.
Exactly.
So
Sometimes I think I've been told throughout my life and career, if you're not upsetting people, then you're not making a difference.
you don't stand for anything then.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, and if you want to just explain the letter to the people watching, I mean, I took it as just a heartfelt thank you for voting for me. You kind of congratulated the graduates. I mean, it wasn't just political per se, but
Yeah, that one I sent at the start of the summer, right around the graduation season. I was thanking Klamath County for voting for me. I did get the most votes in the primary. I'm humbled by that. I'm honored. It had a deep, I guess, impact on me, realizing that this might be real, and I've really done a lot of introspection to understand the meaning, that I might be elected to represent upwards of 70,000 people, and that's big. And so in that letter, I wanted to explain to Klamath County my humility and humbleness and my thankfulness, and then I went on to talk a little bit about the graduating class because I had kids graduating and all of their friends, and it made me reflect on how Klamath County. I grew up in Klamath County, and it provided me with all kinds of opportunities that as a collective county, fostered my education through sports, adult mentors, and made me a good citizen. And those things still happen in our county. And it was great to see this class graduate at the beginning of the summer and move on to chase their dreams. And I was just trying to capture that and kind of tone down, the political rhetoric after the primary and get back to talking about who we are as citizens of Klamath County.
And Dave, actually, if I'm not mistaken, you read the entire letter on the previous episode.
I didn't read the entire letter, but yeah, I just kind of summarized, and that's the way I took it. And to me, that should be the platform where you do so. Kind
Yeah.
of like, yeah.
Well, I appreciate that, Joe.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's not, we're fans not because you've been on the show, but because of what you stand for.
Well, thank you. And if the Miss Jackson, I would encourage her to reach out to you guys too. I don't know if she has or not.
No.
But
No, we've numerous times we've extended an open invitation to, if you're running for an elected office, please, love to have you on here. We've extended an invitation to some of our fellow interviewers that are out there that have not acknowledged the invitation. So, and I will extend that invitation again if you are. Whether you're home-based media or you are part of the Herald and News or you're running for office, here's an open invitation. Reach out through bigroostermedia@gmail.com or comment on the video. We want to hear your side too.
Yeah.
So I do have some friends that live, they've got a ranch up between Chiloquin and Sprague River. And they've got this notification that they are now on a floodplain. And it's going to drive their insurance costs up. It's going to devalue their property. There's really no history of that area flooding, and they were excited to know that I was going to be talking to you today. So they wanted to get your perspective on it. They do watch the show regularly, so
absolutely. So I am fairly educated on this issue. I wouldn't call myself an expert, but I have went to the meetings with the Planning Commission where they presented the issues regarding this. There was roughly, and don't quote me on the numbers, but it was 6,000, 6,400, something like that, initial letters that went out to property owners stating that, hey, this is potentially going to be redesignated as a floodplain. And you're right, the impacts are insurance goes up, potential property values going down. And if I'm a property owner in that area, I'm not going to be very happy. So this is one of those areas where the federal government meddles in things in local government and gives us these mandates that have these wide-reaching impacts, but then nothing to offset these mandates, nothing to help out the general public that these mandates hurt. And what the Federal Emergency Management Organization has done in trying to prevent and mitigate disasters, they use new technology, whether it's high-flying radar or satellite, that can map the Earth and say what areas are high and what areas are low, and how does that connect with the hydrology of the land. And then they come out with these studies, the impact studies that are going to say, well, there's potential for a 100-year flood event for this area to be flooded, a 50-year flood event for this area to be flooded. And that's how they come up with that data. And then they go and tell the local governments, like, hey, you need to adopt this. And they tie strings to it. If you do not adopt this, you will no longer receive federal funding for disaster, for mitigation, for numerous things. And so they tie your hands and they corner the local government to their policies. And if you don't do their policies, they make the alternative so catastrophic that you can't. So in this case, if we weren't to adopt FEMA's recommendations for the floodplain, one, they would immediately stop any funding. They wouldn't provide any resources or funding in the event of not just a flood, any disaster, fires.
Oh, really? So it
Yes.
applied.
Yes, it would apply across the board with all sorts of federal funding.
Gotta love our government.
It would touch lots of things. Now, I do understand that they're trying from a federal level to do disaster mitigation, and say, hey, you need insurance here because the federal government doesn't want to have to come in and pay for it as well. But there people talk about like dam removal. And I don't know the answer to this, but I think it's a good question. So the dams were removed, thereby allowing more water to go down. And common sense, I guess, would tell you that there's less likelihood of a flood if we're not blocking the water. Now, I'm not a hydrologist. And somebody out there might be saying, "Oh, he's wrong." If I'm wrong, I'm wrong.
Yeah.
But this is what the general public is going to think. Hey, you took the dams out. Now water free flows. I haven't had to maintain flood insurance forever, and
Right.
now you're saying, in light of this, that they're going to correlate it that way and say, why now? Now seems like the worst time almost. But it goes back to federal government and their control over everything to deal with natural resources, water. And we can talk about water, whether it's flooding or whether it's not giving us enough, or.
Right. Right.
Um, so there is still some things moving forward. There is going to be a public comment with the planning commission and the county government. It'll happen at the fairgrounds. I don't have the date. It's sometime this next month. And all those impacted will be able to come down, hear a presentation, hear the whys, and in some way, shape, or form, they'll be able to provide public comment. I think all those details for the logistics of this are still being ironed out. But I'm not an elected county commissioner, but I do go to all the meetings. I've spent this majority of this year really trying to educate myself, and I feel the dilemma that our government leaders face when they're likely going to adopt all of these regulations. That's going to have wide impacts on our citizens and upset them, and I would be upset too, and I understand why. But the secondary, tertiary effects of not adopting this are just unacceptable. And if we did have that 50 or 100-year flood event and we got no help from FEMA or the federal government, as a county, we don't have the resources to respond to something like that. A great example is like the A Canal. A Canal is old, it's aging. Part of it runs above like Mills Edition in that area. Imagine if that thing breached.
Yeah.
It something similar happened probably 70, 80 years ago. Again, someone's going to say you're wrong on the date, but it was mid-century, and there was photos of where Sixth and Washburn are now with several feet of standing water right there. Well, that's all developed area now, and so in an event like that, like yes, we locally, the KID, emergency management, try to prepare for these things, but an act of God we can't stop. And in those cases, that's where we need state and federal resources to help us. And the only way we get those is they're going to tie you to their policies. It creates a really tough dilemma for government.
So this is more one of those don't hate the messenger, meaning your county commissioners. They're just delivering the message that the feds are putting on them.
Yeah, they're having to make a choice between two really drastically bad things, and which one's worse. Ultimately, the not being prepared for the disaster is worse, and the loss of all sorts of resources that we depend on. And I wish we lived in a different government dynamic where we didn't depend on federal and state government handouts, but the reality is we do.
And so I transplanted to Texas for a minute, and I was in flood zone. Hurricanes are a thing down there. So I fully understand the FEMA thing. I saw that in action. I get all that part. So I guess my question is, when we removed the dams, was that a federal blessing, or did we just do that locally?
We absolutely didn't do that locally. Our local
This-
government had no play in or the decision making process there.
Wow. Okay.
So I was asked, and I'm sure we'll touch on this several times through this podcast, but I was asked in a forum last week, what is the biggest challenge facing Klamath County? And I gave a very distinct and different answer than everybody else at the forum. And my answer is our biggest challenge is the federal government, whether it's funding, whether it's natural resources, whether it's disaster management. We have the federal government telling us what we're going to do based off of scenarios. FEMA does all of their planning based out of past scenarios, whether it's hurricanes, earthquakes, floods, or that they respond to all around the country. But what worked for Texas or Florida isn't the same in Klamath
Well, and that's not how a constitutional republic is supposed to work.
Well,
But
yeah, and I wasn't comparing it to Texas. So when you said that answer, I realized what, I saw FEMA in action.
Yeah,
And of course, we needed it down there. And I had I
absolutely.
mean, insurance was crazy down there. I understand all that. It's unfortunate for the people here that haven't experienced that. There's no way to put it other. It is what it is. I just, that's a shame. That's kind of backwards thinking, I guess.
There are some, and your friends. I don't know specifically where they live, but there is some historical data of the Sprague River Valley, and I saw some photos. If you go watch the Planning Commission's meeting on this, I think it happened about a month ago. They did talk about the historic floods that we've had and showed different photos, and they showed photos within the Sprague River Valley where bridges were taken out and things were flooded. So these things do happen. They're very rare, and there might be numerous incidents, and this is probably, and I'm making some assumptions here, but a lot of people that own property might have owned it for the last 20 or 30 years and aren't even aware of those events that happened in the past. Now, the likelihood of it happening again is probably pretty slim. But this isn't the county government making these choices. We get the choice to adopt their rules or not adopt their rules. And by not adopting their rules, we no longer get help. And then if we had that event, which and we will have, whether it's a fire, earthquake, something,
right.
we will have events here locally that are wide ranging and affecting. It's not a matter of if, it's when. We all know that type of stuff. And we are going to have to rely on outside resources.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. It's just what do you want to call it, a wicked circle, or you know. So yeah, they're fortunately they were right in the heart of that fire. I can't recall the name of it. That was just about a month and a half ago out there.
Was that the Copperfield?
Yeah, and fortunately they survived that. So
Unfortunately, though, like in that scenario, we did have people lose homes, and then the fires. Last night I attended the long-term recovery group's first fundraiser, and it's a group that works to help out people that have been affected by fires, floods, mostly fires because that's what has affected our area, and a lot of our fires that like that fire that took out several homes, it doesn't reach the parameters for FEMA help.
yeah,
So then we have to use our local resources and our volunteer organizations and our nonprofits in order to help us recover from these things. So that complicates like the flood thing even more. It's like, well, FEMA doesn't help us. Well, they don't unless it's major, but if it is major, we have to have their help.
yeah,
We'll bankrupt our county, our people, everybody if we don't have their help in the event of that 1,500-year
event.
event. Yes, sir.
And it kind of, I guess I can parlay that into, I think another thing that is a common frustration for us is water management. And this whole thing with Tule Lake, I saw that the first go around and they emptied the lake. And I mean, that's part of the Pacific Flyway. Those migrating birds and that depend on certain areas by instinct to survive. You okay, they have a botulism outbreak, so they drain the lake. I can't imagine that didn't kill a whole lot more birds just because, okay, well, that's not a resource for us anymore. Then you refill it, bring it back into play, draw the animals back in, and then cut the water off again because you have to flush the dam drainage out. Or I'm not sure. It's either the grossest mismanagement of anything that I've ever seen, or they are intentionally damaging uh, the animals, the that whole Tule Lake irrigation district down there. To me they are trying to get rid of not just that lake and the animals that travel through it, but the regional farmers as well. I cannot help but think that not the big companies, not the Planasas and all those guys. I feel like because they'll weather the storm. They got farms all over the country, if not the world. It's the farmer that lives here, that's been here for generations, who's you know got something from the auctions back after World War II when they were giving out the land, and those are the people that I cannot help but feel are in the crosshairs because they can't be controlled as easy as a corporation. That's my
No,
I'll put my tin hat on, but
you're
that's
exactly
that's where
right.
I'm at.
We have small farms that are selling out quickly around here to the bigger farms, and the small family farmer is quickly going extinct. And either that or they're having to live off government handouts. Which, if you know a farmer, that's about the last thing they
Oh
want.
yeah.
They want to get out and work the land and harvest their crop and get it to market. They don't want to look at a dry, barren field and take the crumbs the government gives them for not farming it. And it's not okay. The water issue is another example of the federal government meddling in our local resources to the peril of everybody. And whatever side you're on in the water issue, whether it's you're on the side of environmental groups or farmers or businesses, because it has a wide range impact to everybody. Whatever side you're on, you're upset.
Right.
Everybody's upset, and it's all the people at the federal level making decisions. And to kind of talk about what we were talking about earlier, like the Department of Interior and the Bureau of Reclamation that controls this stuff, they use their experience from other places, be it the Colorado watershed or the Sacramento watershed, and they bring those policies here and try to institute that type of stuff. Well, it's not the same. The economics are different, the culture is different, the hydrology, the geography, everything's different. We are not that watershed. And the farmers, like you're talking about, they did an economic impact study of farming here this summer. And again, don't quote me on the numbers, but it was several hundred, like $500 million that into our local economy from agriculture. And that turns over up to 8 times. And as we watch these farms go away and go away and go away, it's not only going to stop the growth that we have, it's going to go the other way. Much like when the logging industry went away here, we're going to see that deep of impacts. I mean, that was 40 years ago, and we're just now starting to recover from that. And then we're facing this other catastrophic thing that economically, environmentally, there's different science out there with the level of the lake. Some people say that this level is best for the endangered sucker, but then if you look at the science of holding it at that level, well, it's not actually helping the fish out; it's hurting the fish. Um, I've spent all of the last 4 or 5 months I go to all the water users meetings. I've gone to some KID meetings to really, because I'm not the smartest guy in the room on all this. There are
Right now, you probably are.
well, maybe there are much smarter people about this than I am.
Yeah.
And there are some great local solutions out there where the water users and the tribes have tried to come together and create better habitat, create more sustainable farming practices that provide wetlands and farming on a rotational basis. There's a really awesome plan. It's the flow through plan, and Moss Driscoll, he talks about this a lot. And the idea is flowing the water from the lake through the project in order to clean it up, natural filtration, and cool it down. And then as it gets down in the two lake sumps, there's already the infrastructure there to pump it back over the hill into the Klamath River, thereby providing downstream with cleaner water, with cooler water for those fish that are running upstream. And it eventually it would probably help clean our watershed as water's moving. Because right now, if the lake stays stagnant all summer at, I think it's 4139 or thereabouts is the elevation. If it stays stagnant at that, I mean, you guys have all been out to the lake, it just gets nastier and
Yeah.
nastier. And that's not a good environment for any of our species, fish, waterfowl, and it's a travesty not putting water down on our refuge. If you look at the natural hydrology of here before dams and development and all of that, the water would come out of Upper Klamath Lake and splash into what was Lower Klamath Lake that doesn't exist now. And I mean, you could take ferries
Down the
from
Malin, couldn't
yeah,
you? Yeah.
which was all water at one point, and human intervention did change that, right? And we all know that, and everybody, not everybody sustainability. There's a side that would love to go back to that. That's really not feasible. The amount of business and homes and everything we would displace, it's not feasible. So we have to work within the construct we have. And this flow through plan that they're talking about, it very close to mimics what actually used to happen in the best way we can do it now with what has been developed and how things have happened. But the solution, in my mind, and there's people that are going to argue with me, and that's okay. The solution really needs to be a locally driven solution where the agriculture industry, the business industry, the tribes, all the stakeholders are coming together and talking about what is going to be best for our area. Our local governments have been working on that. There's a tri-county group with our county and the northern counties in California that meet. There's local governments of all the municipalities and the tribes that meet, where we're trying to find areas where we can cooperate and agree on issues like water. And our water users, they're constantly working with the tribes and the tribes vice versa to find areas where we can agree. But it seems the roadblock always is the federal government. The Bureau of Reclamation, they come out with these new operation plans that don't seem to include any of the things that actually matter to our local business, agriculture, tribes, everybody.
So why do we accept, bow down, however you want to put it, to the federal government? Do we not have? Is it for funding, or why can't our folks say, you know what, we are going to do it locally. We don't want you involved. We are our own state, and this is how we're going to handle it.
And different groups are trying that through the judicial process, and the judiciary takes time. I mean, the cases will sit in the Ninth Circuit for years before they're reviewed. And in that time, science changes, ideas changes, plans changes. Um, why don't we just take it from the federal government? And that's talking about something big. How do you tell the federal government to go away?
Wouldn't it kind of be the same as the floodplain thing? Yeah, we can turn them down, but then FEMA's not going to show up to save the day.
Exactly.
You
Like
don't have that kind of power with.
there's been talks in the past about like, well, they're just going to go open the floodgates anyways.
Yeah, I know a guy that bought property nearby with that in mind.
Yeah, if we go open the headgates for the project, outside of the bureau's mandates, there's going to be serious consequences. One for the people that do it.
Oh,
That
absolutely. Yeah.
they're going to be charged with crimes, probably federal crimes, and there is a school of thought that wants to go the direction of like Amon Bundy and those groups where we take over. But if history tells you anything, that hasn't worked, and people have lost their lives doing
Oh,
this
yeah.
kind of stuff. And that's not the way the American government is intended to run. You know, sometimes it's to the peril of people like us. We happen to be on a different side of the issue, and it's not good for us. But I don't think the answer is violence or
No.
criminality or those types of things. We have to continue to try to work together. We need our ag industry and our tribes and our business to work together. I mean, so I grew up here, and there was a big division, between tribal and farmers. And we want what we want. We want what we want. And the truth is, we want a lot of the same things. And what we really need is the federal government not telling all of us what we need to do. And if collectively we can come up with solutions, I think that is the answer. And then we can go to the federal government and say, on a unified front, here are our solutions as a community of Klamath County, the Northern California counties, everybody in this watershed, to show what is going to work for all of us, and not just these, plans made by the federal government that don't take into account the secondary, tertiary impacts of their policies.
So what do you think the incentive is right now for those that are? 'Cause I think we tend to agree that the local farmer is targeted, and why?
Yeah, well, first off, I'd like to say that we have some resilient farmers. They've fought this fight for decades.
Yeah.
And now learning the history, my grandfather and my great grandfathers were talking about these issues and working through some of it then. Maybe not to the level we have in the last 30 years, but um, we do have some very resilient farmers that have really worked at innovative ways to help with this issue. Um, I talked myself in a circle and forgot your question. I was going there with it. So
Well, no, my question was just we seem to agree on the fact that the family farmer is in the crosshairs.
yes, it is.
And why?
And
What's the motivation?
so there's a school of thought out there that this is larger policies, United Nation policies that are
Agenda
trying.
21 type stuff.
Yes,
Yeah.
and it's had several different names, and we're seeing through government these different competing agendas from think tanks and large world global organizations, and the thought is that they're trying to drive people out of the rural life and into the city life, and I can definitely understand when you look at what's going on in government why that perception is there, and it very much seems like reality to a lot of people. I don't know that I buy in that there's like some shadow government somewhere pulling the strings saying, this is what we're going to do to Klamath County.
Right.
No, but these policies that they become pervasive down through government and ultimately do impact local governments like our county. And again, like I said, our biggest challenge is the federal government and is these larger policies that don't fit in with what works in Klamath County. A question. So I'm running for county commissioner. What's a county commissioner's role in that? And I've put a lot of deep thought into that. What is a county commissioner's role? I've watched our current commission. I've talked to past county commissioners, and it's a tough question. And I see the biggest role for me at this point, anyway, was a point of education. And like I said, I've spent the last 5 months now educating myself the best I possibly can on this, and um, bringing people into my circle who are very smart on these issues. And given the opportunity with a state and federal lawmaker, if I go back to Washington, D.C. for an Association of Counties meeting and I've got 10, 15 minutes with a federal lawmaker, and I want to have a really good educated argument. And that's what I want to be able to do as a county commissioner is go back there and advocate for our local control of our resources. You're cutting us off and not giving us a say in what is having deep and wide impacts on our citizens, our county, our population. And I see that as being one role of the county commissioner, and then on a more local level, bringing people together and knocking down some of these long-standing rivalries between tribes and farmers and business. And our current county commissioners have set up some framework for doing that. They have council of governments. They have the tri-counties with the other governments. So they're trying to do that, and I would like to stay on those tracks, but expand it even more and get us talking even more, and then start taking some of these unified plans. And they're doing it right now. The Water Users Association will come up with plans and get the tribes to say, would you agree to this? And they'll say, well, you need to change this or that. And then we'll agree. And then they'll sign on to ideas together and push that to reclamation. And I think the more we can do that and stop infighting amongst us and find solutions that are going to work best for everybody. Now, we all know there isn't a solution that's going to make the agriculture industry 100% happy, the tribal nations 100% happy, and business 100% happy. But the whole concept of American government is finding compromise and finding where we can come together. And this issue, as critical as it is to everybody, it doesn't matter who you are or what your stake in this is, we must come together as a community and continue to push on the federal government. Like, you're going to hurt our community in a real big way if we don't have water for agriculture, if we aren't thinking about our wildlife, our ducks, our fish, all those things that are part of our ecosystem here.
See, I've only been around the area a little less than 20 years, but going down, well, I used to work down the Tule Lake area delivering fuel to the farmers and that down there. And hearing the stories, I'd get excited when I'd see a pheasant crossing the road. And, oh man, it used to be pheasant everywhere and ducks everywhere. And I mean, hearing the stories from the people that lived and grew up down there versus what I see today, I mean, it just seems like that whole wildlife arena, if you will, has just been decimated. I mean, just and it breaks my heart because you hear stories about how even Tule Lake, what a fun town it used to be, and you see pictures of Klamath Falls, and it's a great city today. But you see what it was in the 50s, 60s, and what a booming town it was, and then logging kind of took that away. Um, I love it here. I just don't want to see something like that happen to it again.
And if our agriculture industry tanks, we're very much going to see probably worse than we saw with the logging industry, with the amount of money that's there. You were talking about the refuges down there, and I went on the Klamath Water Users do a fall harvest tour, and I went on the first one this year, and they have this concept down on the California side. It's called the walking wetland, but the farmers are they're taking the initiative on their own to try to create more habitat for the Pacific Flyway, and they're rotating crops and creating wetlands. So um, Mark Staunton, he's a farmer down there,
Mark well.
and Mark gave us a presentation on this. With they this year they grew a crop of potatoes in this field, and then after harvesting the potatoes, they then flooded that field back into wetland. And it's amazing that immediately all the plant life and the wildlife and all of that came back within that next year, by the next year. And then they can leave it in wetland for a certain period of time. And then the field next to it be growing the crop. And then after that crop gets harvested, the water moves over to the other field, becomes a wetland, and then this becomes a farming again. So that it's a kind of a sustainable homeostasis between the habitat and the farmers that they're trying to create. And in this scenario, the water that's being used for that is project allocated water. So the farmers are using their water allocated to what's supposed to be growing
Right.
to create habitat, and that's I think they deserve credit for that.
Absolutely.
And that's something where like the bureau and the federal government should be looking like, oh, maybe we should be offsetting that amount of water.
They're taking money out of their own pockets to try to
Yeah.
sustain the wildlife.
And then that also creates some political infights within the farming community too, because if a person on this irrigation district isn't getting the water they need, then why does the person on this irrigation district get to make a wetland? So it creates inner politics within the farming community, and I understand why,
Oh yeah.
because everybody's scrapping for every last drop of water, because like I said before, everybody wants to farm and produce in that community, and it's really unfortunate what we have been put in. And again, back to what I see my role as is trying to be a facilitator of local solutions and being as educated as I possibly can. So given that opportunity with the federal lawmakers, I can give them the why for, and I can give them the reality of what's happening on the ground. I can invite them, come here, come tour our area, come see that what your policies have created and the potential devastation that your policies are going to create in the future if we stay on this track that we are.
Okay.
This may be a big muddy and may not be on the same subject, but you kind of touched on that, to like the bigger, driving people to the bigger cities, which I don't see us as Klamath as like a city of the future, whatever. Like, because I've heard that before too. Like they want everybody really in apartment buildings with
15 minutes.
yeah, a 15-minute city, which I don't see Klamath being as that. You kind of touched that. To to me, and we've kind of covered it on the show too. Does the Greater Idaho thing completely muddy that? Does that help us in any type of?
So Greater Idaho, I think that it's a great idea. I think that the Klamath County voted on
Mm.
looking into this, and our citizens had said, "Hey, this is something we're interested in." I will say, as a county commissioner, I don't have our county commissioners, any county commissioner, doesn't have a lot of power in that arena. In order for a Greater Idaho thing to happen, I don't think a grassroots movement is going to do that because of the power structures higher. That why would the state of Oregon let this giant economic resource that is Eastern Oregon go away? The Democrats up there are not going to let that happen. And do you think Idaho is going to buy that from them? Like
Right.
so when you get in, and then is the federal government going to authorize this? And as much of a novel idea it is that would probably change and drive solutions to a lot of our issues, I, as a county commissioner, don't want to spend a lot of time and energy on something that isn't in the foreseeable future. And if that changes and the dynamic in the federal government changes and the state government changes, I will absolutely jump in because that's what the people of county said they're interested in. But as far as spending county resources, man hours, time on studying or working a greater Idaho issue, we can barely afford to provide the services we have right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
I guess I was just saying it seems like our small town mentality may fit better with.
Yes.
You would think Portland would be happy to get rid of us.
Right. Yes.
We're just a thorn in the side, but
Right.
we still generate revenue.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. There's a lot of money that comes in out of
Yeah.
Eastern Oregon, and they're not just going to let that go away.
Right.
you
That's the
know.
only reason they're hanging on to us.
Yeah,
I'm sure.
probably because ideologically, like you
Yeah.
can look at the maps where our issues are very different, and we're not unique to that. There's all over the Western United States.
Oh yeah.
Has
Yeah.
to deal with the big cities.
All
Have
have a certain
policies
mentality.
that creep into the rural areas, and those policies conflict pretty hard. And
Yeah.
it's just something that we have to work through in our government, and that is a set of circumstances we have right now. I'm not running for president or senator or anything like that, and so my ability to impact those, on the county commission level is at an advocacy level. What I can do though is have honest communications with our community about here's what the federal government's doing, and here's what the potential impacts are. Here's how the county can try to mitigate some of those impacts, and here's how you can help. And our different associations, be it realtors, water users, and even the county themselves, they'll put out information on like, hey, this is happening at the federal government. Please make public comment. When you see those things going around social media, like, jump on them, make your voice heard within the federal government.
I think a lot of people feel like that just goes into an empty mailbox and nobody ever do that. Those kind of things actually get read and addressed, as far as you know.
They do, but I think the empty mailbox is frustration because the people that hold the power aren't interested in your ideas, and so you get frustrated because you're like, our ideas and our thoughts and our way of life isn't being considered.
Yeah.
And I agree with that, and it's a very, very tough scenario for anybody to navigate. And if you're looking for the county commissioner to have the magic wand and fix it, if someone else out there has it, please run for this office. I'm running for it because I think that I understand the issues on a pretty deep level. I'm from here my whole life. I've spent my whole life working and literally fighting wars and representing this community around the world. And I care deeply about our home, and I want to give the best representation of our people that I possibly can.
Well, and you kind of touched on something there about people feeling like that's nothing goes on; it goes into an empty mailbox. Well, what you're doing is what people need to do if they want to make change, whether it's county commissioner or city council or a higher Senate or Congress. Run, get
Or
involved.
media.
Yeah,
Getting message
get
out.
involved.
I
Yeah,
agree.
just sitting there in your living room and yelling at your TV isn't going to fix anything. So,
Yeah, and call me, email me, call me, come sit with me. Like I'm all ears for listening to everybody's ideas. I don't care what your ideology or what side of the aisle you say you're on. If we're gonna find local solutions, everybody needs to have a seat at the table.
yeah, yeah, and that's what we're trying to do here. We're trying to, I don't think we judge anybody on what their ideology may be. We just want to hear everybody's voices and get it out to the people.
No, and I can't judge you on your water knowledge because you are the brightest guy in the room right now. So I mean, yeah, I'm just listening, and it makes all sense of what you're saying.
Yeah, there's a lot of people way smarter than me on this
Well,
issue.
granted, but right now, give me right now.
Yeah, fair enough.
Well, what's on? What do you got there? What did you?
Well, I wrote some notes down
Oh, okay.
to if I was going to come in today, and there was a stall. I wanted to talk about my top three things that. So in going around the county throughout the primary and throughout the summer and doing different events, it feels like I'm at an event every day doing something, whether it's an interview or a fundraiser or a sporting event or something. And I've talked to a lot of people, and I've generated what I think are the three biggest things kind of facing the county that where people are frustrated about that I wanted to talk about. And we've already one of them is natural resources. We've just hit on it quite a bit. The only thing we really didn't get into was forest management. Our federal government doesn't manage its forest very well, and that's evident with the fires that we have. And that ties into the water and the hydrology of the land, and that we're so far away from natural state that the land gets dry, and then it's not managed the way that it should be or could be, and then we're not getting the dollars that we should be or could be getting out of our forests if they were managed properly. So water, forestry, our natural resources altogether, huge topic in this county. And I think I've already kind of beat a dead horse about where I see the role of a county commissioner in that. It's trying to drive local solutions and then, you know, yelling at the federal government essentially
Yeah.
any chance we get. Working on a higher level, though, you know, we have an association of counties that is a group counties throughout the country that our county commissioners are a part of, and then there's like Association of Western Counties, and these counties, because like we just talked about earlier, the problems we're facing, there's people in Colorado facing these, Arizona facing very similar issues, and the federal government not doing their part and or creating more problems. And these counties are banding together and are pushing back on the federal government. And I see my role as a county commissioner is being a part of those and being a loud voice back to the federal government. Hey, you're causing most of our problems. Outside of natural resources, a huge thing, and maybe it's because of my background, but it's also because of what we've seen in this county. It's public safety. Measure 110, our state and all of its genius decided to make these hard drugs legal, which had wide-ranging impacts. And I fear, you know, that these impacts that they're going to be generational for a long time.
Yeah.
We spent the last 5 years where it was so pervasive. We've got children growing up in environments where drugs were just openly used all the time. You know, when I was a child, yes, there was a drug problem, but even the kids that their parents were users, it was more of a hidden kind of, you know, taboo type thing, and it just got so pervasive that I think generationally it's going to have long term impacts. Now our legislature did walk it back a little bit. My opinion, not enough, but something's better than nothing, right? There's some compromise there, but the what it has done to public safety in the county regarding property crime, overdoses. Um, I mean, we can just look at our last summer with the
Yeah, it was
homicides.
horrible. The two
Yeah,
girls and the guy
it's
at the
crazy.
school.
And then, you know, our ways to fund our public safety layout is being diminished constantly. The federal government's the biggest landowner in the state, and they've reduced the payments that they give us for that land. It's called PILT dollars, payment in lieu of taxes, since they don't pay taxes. They've reduced that, the Secure Rural Schools funds, so they've greatly reduced dollars we relied on to fund our sheriff's office. And if you didn't see the front page of the paper yesterday, it talks specifically about this. We are going to be facing in this county some tough decisions, and there's some different controversial ideas out there with regards to public safety. I will not ever say I'm tied to one of them. I'm open to listening to any new and innovative ideas. Um, there's the very controversial use of road fund dollars to fund public safety. It has been done in the past. If you look at the dollar amount in our road fund right now and the projected projects that needs to pay for over the next 20 years, we don't even have enough for that. We have several bridge and infrastructure issues within the county where they're seriously degraded. And so if we continue to use those dollars and then we have a major bridge on a County road that shut down for 5 years, that's going to impact agriculture, economics, trucking, industry, all kinds of things. And so it's really not a sustainable practice to continue to use our road fund. I've talked with all the people that have done these projections and done the analysis on our infrastructure, and it's not a sustainable use to use the road fund dollars for public safety. We need to secure those dollars in order to our major infrastructure projects. There's been talk about Klamath Falls Police Department policing the urban growth area. I was, as a union president, this first came up, and I was staunchly against it. Why would we pay an agency that costs more money than the sheriff's office fees to do a service here? And then there's recent talk about cutting out some tax districts, like say East County, carve a taxing district, a public safety district out in East County, and form a board, and they can decide their tax rate and then what they want to do with those dollars, whether they want to hire their own police force or whether they want to contract with the sheriff's office and give that money back to the sheriff's office. But an independent board could set the rate, with the voice of the people, and then decide what they want to do. All of these are novel ideas, great ideas that I think we must continue to talk about. Again, I'm not advocating for one or the other, but this is the type of work we need to do in order to talk about how we're going to pay for public safety moving forward.
Well, and I think I know several people in law enforcement, and it seems like maybe funding is part of it, but the other part is they feel like their hands are tied. Like, okay, yeah, I just saw a crime happen, and yeah, I can go arrest that guy. We'll take him up, we'll book him, and he goes right back out on the street. I think we need to free up. They need to have some form of bite. That when there's an assault that goes on or something like that, that they can actually do some. We had a homeless guy throw a rock through front of a building I'm responsible for over on Spring Street, and he doesn't have any money. They took him off to jail. Well, they took him to the hospital actually, and then the jail, and we were left to pay for that, because obviously we can't sue that guy. He has no money. But I mean, the law enforcement that I talk to is just frustrated because they feel that they just don't have the ability to really enforce it. And they can write a ticket, but how many of
Yeah,
those get paid? So I think that's part two.
it is, and that goes back to higher level government. Our state legislature creates different rules regarding bail reform, regarding drugs, and what amount of punishment is allowed to be given for criminal acts. Um, I think collectively as Klamath County, we probably all agree that what they're doing up there isn't working for us here. How do we balance that? Well, I think that what we need to do is our sheriff, first and foremost, is going to be elected here and start in January. We need to give that new sheriff time and patience and maybe a little bit of compassion to, to reorganize that office the way they see fit and really attack the public safety problems the way they see fit with the support of the county commissioners. Um, what I would like to see from the Board of County Commissioners, just like I was talking with like natural resources, is let's collaborate. That can be the role of the commissioners within public safety. Sheriff, what do you need from us? And here's what we can give you, and let's figure that piece out together, which I can talk a little bit more on funding in a minute. But we have multiple other public safety entities, not just the sheriff's office. Obviously, we have the other law enforcement entities, the KFPD, Oregon State Police, our federal partners, but our mental health, our genuine health care, um, community corrections, the district attorney's office, all of these, the health department, everybody plays some role in public safety. And we need to find areas where we overlap, where we can collaborate, and we can really work together in order to drive solutions for these issues. If we can't get them, if we can't get the offender in jail, where can we get them? What service can we get them to? Um, what what can we really do to inspire this person to try to be a
Productive.
functioning member of society? Now, we all know that there is in the Marine Corps, when I was there, we always said we had our 10%. Our 10% was the people that were just never going to get it. And I think in society that analogy equates to. We do have our portions of society that are just never going to be, productive members of society, and that's their free will and their choice and their right. The problem is when it starts in
But we have to
affecting
fund it.
you
Yeah.
exactly. When your business and you come into work and someone's got a garbage tent camp set up in your parking lot, like that's not okay.
Right.
We can drive up and down South Six and we can see these things and what our business owners have to deal with. Um, Part of it is state issues. Part of it is funding issues. I don't think we collaborate enough to where our mental health resources and our law enforcement resources, they do work together right now. I think they could work together more in a more synergistic approach. Same thing with our health agencies through the health department. We have a public safety council that has all of these entities on it. They meet. I think they're meeting Wednesday of this week. Um, I've talked to several members of this, and they're like, "Well, it's not real productive because we don't really know what we do." So I would like to go in there to them and say, "Let's set some goals.
Right.
What what is something
Don't know what we
you
do.
know what is something we can work on together?
Yeah.
Let's talk about drugs and how the new program, which they call deflection, how is that going to work, and how can we incorporate all of these agencies together to make that program work the best we can make it, given the set of variables that our ingenious state legislatures have given us. And the last thing I wanted to hit on, like my 3 points, um, government transparency and accountability. Um, Better catchphrase as I'm around the county, the quote unquote good old boy club. Everywhere I go, people say the county government's just a good old boy club. And if there is one, I haven't been invited into it yet, but I do think that is something people say out of frustration for lack of what they feel like their voice being heard, lack of transparency. That it always, we watched the sheriff's office and the commissioners kind of battle publicly over the last year, but there wasn't a lot of substance to it, and everybody's like, "Oh, it's because his kids work there." There was so much more substance to all of it. And what I would like to see is like a committee maybe set up that, and this might not be the answer, but it is a thought, a committee set up
Like an oversight.
kind of. So at every level of government, we have the Government Accountability Transparency Office, right? Well, your county government, you don't necessarily have that. The challenge with setting something up like that is who's on the committee, who's willing to be on the committee, what is their background and expertise. Do we have, in my mind, maybe like lawyers, clergy members, people that we hold in very high respect, and even sometimes
Well,
those
you said
people.
lawyers.
Well, lawyers because they know the laws
right.
and the ethics, but
And the clergy to take care of.
yeah, and business leaders, and maybe this committee can set a framework for government accountability and transparency within county government, and then maybe when we have these disputes, I heard Sheriff Caber in a meeting say, "I reached out to the commissioners numerous times for mediation." And he said the word mediation numerous times. Who was going to mediate? I don't know, but maybe if we had a committee that said, "Okay, let's be the neutral party, commissioners. What are your thoughts, sheriff? What are your thoughts?" And it could be a mediation platform. One, they could do a revolving through departments. So everywhere within government has like your inspector general or somebody that comes down and inspects to process everything within government. Maybe we could get this committee to do that through our departments on maybe a quarterly basis. Maybe they say, "Hey, this quarter we're going to look at, I don't know, the road department, and we're going to look at their different processes and make sure they're within our ethics laws and our business laws, and that we're doing everything on the up and up." Because it's always good to get an outside set of eyes looking at it. And so I think this is something that if elected, I'm going to talk about, and I want to talk about how can we improve and increase government transparency. And I've heard my competition. She's saying it's all about communication. She has a degree in communication. She falls back on that, and I understand that. And I listened to an interview with her today. She got interviewed by Christopher German, and she was saying that she wants to set up like a communications employee or public information officer at the county level. Um, that's an idea, and I've heard the current board of commissioners pitch that idea too. First and foremost, I'd say we're talking about funding right now. How are we going to pay for this person? The other thing that crosses my mind is I think where we have communications directors or whatnot within other parts of government, they tend to be very partisan. Look at the White House communications staff, right?
Yep.
They're going to beat the drum of the executive, and so how would we keep that person impartial? Who's if I'm a county commissioner and I have this communications person, how are they work for the county commissioners and the people, but what message are they putting forward? Are they putting forward the county commissioner's message? Are they putting forward the sheriff's message? Are they? So I think it becomes uh, the potential for a very politicized position. And I would rather see something, first and foremost, our government doesn't do a horrible job at communicating right now. People are just disinterested.
Yeah.
Every single action our government does is streamed live on YouTube. You can watch every decision that's made and how they're getting to that decision and talk to it. And you can log in from your computer and give public comment from home. You can do that now. People just are not doing it.
Well, and there's meeting minutes taken as well, are there not?
Yes, there
And
are.
those are public record.
Yes. And you can go
So
online.
it's out there.
You can go online right now to the county's website and you can pull the minutes from every meeting. You can go on through the county's website to the YouTube channel and watch all of this policy making happening.
So instead of a public information person, spokesperson, people need to have the initiative themselves. If you don't like the way government's going, the information is out there. You need to be responsible enough before you just start complaining to go online and see what's going on and have input on county commissioner meetings and city council meetings. That's up to you.
And if we were to hire somebody like that and you're out there, I would be maybe critical of them, because if government has this knack of it's going to protect itself, so you as a citizen, it's part of your civic duty to dig into these issues and find the information for yourself. Now, if there's a way we can make access easier, let's do that. But you can get on your little tablet or that idiot box we all keep in our pocket,
Right.
and you can watch all of this stuff on your own right now.
Yeah.
So those were kind of my top three that I've gotten through the primary: natural resources, public safety, and accountability and transparency within government. And initially, that's what I would really like to focus on, but I will be honest as I possibly can, and I don't know what I don't know. And if elected, I've made it a point throughout this not to make any promises, because I know once you get to a job, you have an idea of what it's going to be, and then you get there, and then the reality set in.
Mm-hmm.
But I can promise that I will talk. I will listen. That's the biggest piece I think I can do, is really listen to people, even the ones I disagree with. In fact, the ones I disagree with, I need to be listening to more and really trying to synthesize, how they got to that conclusion and where we can find compromise.
Yeah. Yeah. I can relate to that in a lot of ways. In the last 10 years, there's been family oriented political division just over differences of different candidates. And you can either write off your family or you can try to find some common ground or just, accept that they are who they are and you are who you are and move on. But I understand the compromise.
So, local economy, that's another issue everybody likes to talk about. There was some numbers that came out with our GDP and us being second in the state with growth, and that's great. It's awesome. There's a lot of good, promising things. If you follow the Klamath County Economic Development Group, they've got a lot of projects coming forward that are going to create more jobs, more industry. The Kingsley Field transition to the F-35, that's going to be huge. Anywhere from 2 to 500 million in local contracts that to upgrade the infrastructure out there. So yes, we need to continue to engage industry like organizations like Casita who lobby industry to come here and continue to make Klamath County open for business. Whatever we can do to bring business here, whatever regulations we can move out of the way to make business county. I think we are a business friendly county right now.
It seems like we've
That
hit a turning point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So have we? It I think there's the feel of one on the horizon.
Okay.
And that is really when we start talking about our budgets, right? But just because the county government doesn't have a lot of money doesn't mean we can't still be inviting people here. Where it gets tough is if the county government isn't fully funding services, then crime rates go up. And then businesses are like, whoa, do we want to go there? They've got high crime, they've got high drug use. And so that's where it gets tough with the budget and what services we provide. Is a government that's providing adequate services is usually going to make a friendly environment for business to come into. Which is why, again, the federal government is our biggest challenge because they're continuing to put more and more and more regulation on us and take away more and more and more resources from us. And we need to be, one, as citizens, we need to be paying attention to these federal elections and who we're putting into office and the things that they're actually saying, um, and how they're going to help us and or hurt us. And then our local leaders, our commissioners, need to be constantly, giving the why for to our state and federal lawmakers and letting them know how much they're hurting our communities.
Yeah, because I mentioned to you before we got started, I saw one day an article that, oh, we're growing, we're at 3.1 billion gross domestic product for the county, and I thought, man, that's great to hear. And we've got Amazon building here in town, and Winco's going to break ground in a couple months, and then like 3 or 4 days, might have been Thursday, how there's concerns about how we're going to fund certain projects in town. I'm like, but wait, I just read that we were, you know, our GDP is growing and we're at 3.1 billion, but now a few days later I'm reading that we can't afford, these certain projects that they were talking about. And forgive me, I don't remember exactly what it was, but you had brought it up also. It was in the newspaper the other day, and
Yeah,
it's just it's
and that was getting
for a simple person, it's hard to understand.
Yeah, what that newspaper article was, what I took out of it was talking about using road fund dollars to fund the sheriff's office and how that is not a sustainable solution. Um, I've sat through the budget processes. I understand where the shortfalls are, and they're there. That's the simple reality to it. One of the things I've campaigned on, and I just talked about it, was public safety. And on a philosophical level, I believe that government's first priority is to provide for the general safety of it. I mean, that's captured within our Constitution on through down, and I think that matters at the local level. Um, how do we properly fund our sheriff's office? That is a huge challenge. What I've proposed already, and I've said this in other interviews lately, is securing funding. Now, as soon as I say secure funding for the sheriff's office, people think levy tax raises. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the general fund dollars that we currently have, earmarking a certain amount of that that will always go to the sheriff's office. If we take I'm going to probably be slightly off on this number, but it's like $1.73 is about per thousand is about our property tax rate right now. Like 5 cents of that is already earmarked and dedicated for veterans funds, leaving $1.68 or something like. What I'd like to see that remainder amount of the tax dollars, the property tax dollars that go to the general fund. I'd like to see us put an initiative on the ballot that says that money will forever be earmarked for the sheriff's office. Because each year right now, I mean, if the commissioners really wanted to pull the strings of power, they could just defund the sheriff's office, right? That is a possibility. If I'm there, that will never happen.
Good,
But
good.
but what I would like to see is the ability for that to happen removed, and we can say, hey, here is 11 million or 12 million from the general fund that is permanently to the sheriff's office. Now, the people out there that are watching me, they're probably say that ain't enough, because anybody that knows the current sheriff's office budget this year is about 17 million. So we're looking at anywhere from a 5 to 6 million difference there. And how do we get that money? It's going to need to be a collaborative approach to find grant money to lobby our state and federal. Emily McIntyre, who's the western side of the county, her and I have already had conversations about, hey, we need help from Salem in the public safety platform. And she's currently working on a bill for getting some dollars down to us. So it's going to take innovative, collaborative approaches to make up the gap to really get to where we need for public safety dollars. But in the interim, if you watch, again, you should pay attention to your county government. Last week, the sheriff came before the Board of County Commissioners and said that he's seriously considering and potentially might shut down a good portion of the Klamath County Jail, shut down 2 pods, thereby releasing potentially 100 criminals back into society. And his problem right now isn't a funding issue, and it's not because he doesn't have the money. It's a staffing issue right now. We just can't keep the people up there, which is a whole nother thing we could talk about, the whys on that. But in the past, there has been funding issues, and the community has screamed when that jail has limited capacity or shut down. And by securing funding, even at a limited amount, we could guarantee that the jail is going to stay open, that our civil division is still going to run, that our search and rescue is still going to be working. And these are like constitutionally mandated things by the sheriff. The drawback to that is, where's the money for our patrol services and our patrol deputies? And the writing on the wall right now is we might not have that money unless we really start come together and find innovative solutions to bridge that gap. But in the meantime, what I want to see as the former president of the union, as a former deputy, is I want to see at least a certain amount of funding secured. I'd like to see that on the next round of voting, the next ballot we have. I will push for an initiative on there to have a secure dollar amount to the so it removes a little bit of politics from it. And even though it's not adequate, the sheriff can say, I know I have this much money to work with. And then he can go to the community and say, here are the services I can provide with the money I'm given. And then I will always be the advocate on the BOC that is trying to cut from wherever else we can to make up that gap for our public safety footprint.
So in the last ballot, I think the 911 was on there. And to me, that was horribly, maybe I didn't do all my homework, but to me, that was a tax raise for the people for equipment is what they called that. And it passed. Why can't that, or why couldn't it be written better to support what you're saying, to earmark money? Because it all relates. If you call 911, they have the equipment, then there's nobody to go out on that call.
Correct. So that I would like to see, like I'm saying, a secure funding amount. What we saw with 911 was additional funding, right? It was a measure to say we're going to earmark more money and tax more money in order to pay for these new systems within 911. Now, having been a law enforcement officer, those new systems are going to be very helpful once they come online across the county. But this all goes back to kind of the public safety footprint. It's not just the sheriff's office. Like if we were to ever pass anything like that, I think a sheriff's office levy per se, if the appetite was there, would be the wrong approach, and a public safety levy would be a better approach, to where we're talking about dollars to the DA's office, dollars to mental health, dollars to law enforcement. But the truth is, it's been tried here, and the people, there doesn't seem to be an appetite to pass a levy, a tax levy to fund public safety.
We'll give you the equipment, though.
Yeah.
Wow.
So,
Okay.
if I'm understanding, so each year the sheriff has to start from scratch with what
Correct.
dollar amount he's going to have to work with.
So
that
that's
year.
the way it works right now.
Wow.
And what I would like to propose, at least in the interim, isn't necessarily increasing the tax rate, because the citizens have shown that there's no appetite for that, but at least securing a dollar amount out of our general fund now and saying, Sheriff, no matter what, you're going to get $11 million, $12 million, whatever we can cut out on that budget.
Yeah.
So at least the sheriff each year isn't going through this dance of, what are we going to get? And then really the employees at the sheriff's office, every year, are we going to get pink slips? Are we going to get, nobody knows. Well, if we have at least a secure amount, that's a starting point.
Yeah. That's insane. That's like
making
trying
too much sense
to run a business without knowing how much you're going to have to fund it. And I can't imagine trying to operate that way.
Well,
That's crazy.
And in defense of the county's much of the same. We don't know how much money. We know what we're going to get in property taxes, but we don't know what the federal government's going to give us in PILT dollars and secure rural schools and different grants and funding streams, because we have hundreds of different funding streams from state and federal government for different programs. Um, but each year on a county level, it's kind of a dance. And like this year, they went through the budget process on projections based on past years and what we were getting from the federal government, and that fell way short, which is why we're now having this discussion on the front page of the paper. How are we going to fund government?
Wow.
So at the minimum, like I said, public safety is the first priority of government. The general safety of the public.
Yeah.
We need to take a dollar amount out of that budget and secure it. We need to ask the people if they're willing to take a dollar amount out of that budget and secure it and say, no matter what, the sheriff's office will get X dollars, 11 million, 12 million, 13, whatever we can reasonably afford and guarantee to the sheriff's office.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's what I'd like to see get on the ballot.
Makes sense.
And you're going to hear my opponent. I've heard her numerous times in the last 2 or 3 weeks. She's done interviews and forums, and she'll say, "I'm going to make sure public safety is fully funded." It's much more nuanced and difficult than that. How? That's my question to my
It's like
opponent.
saying I'm going to make sure all my bills are paid.
Yes, but how?
But yeah,
So what I'm doing is I'm offering the citizens of this county some solutions. They're not perfect, and they're not enough. Frankly, that's the truth. It's not enough, but within our means and what we have the ability to secure a dollar amount for our sheriff's office.
okay.
Well, and here, this is I guess if you look at the national scale, that's the word salad competition anymore. You can say hey, we need public funding for safety. Well,
We'll make sure it's there.
yeah,
but
well, yeah, yay!
yeah, there's no explanation.
And then there's no on
any
the
of it.
backside. Well, how are you going to do that? Well, see, we're going to take them. At least you can come
You
up
have a
with
plan.
something. Yes. And
Yeah.
maybe that's the communication major. Wow. But you have a plan that.
Yeah, well, I'm trying to provide substantive solutions, and I'm not up here pontificating that my solutions are the best. There's been other ideas which we talked about with the taxing districts, with using road fund dollars, with using different police agencies, and those are all ideas. And if elected, I'm willing to talk about any idea. Doesn't mean I'm willing to execute it necessarily, because it's got to be what are we going to get the most bang for our buck for as Klamath County?
Yeah. No, it's something I learned in my 20s. Don't bring up a problem unless you've got a solution to go along with it. So,
I agree wholeheartedly.
yeah. Well, we've taken up plenty of your time, and I know you're a pretty busy guy. I'm just going to leave this to you if you have anything
Yeah,
else. that you wanna-
I'll touch on one thing. I don't think we hit on it, but you had brought it up when we were off camera, and that was election integrity. There's been a lot of stuff come up in the news, especially our local news, about non-citizens being registered to vote. I will say I personally was a victim, I guess, if that's maybe not the right word. But my voter registration was changed through the DMV. I've always been a registered Democrat, and all of a sudden I became an independent. And I'm like, whoa, how'd that happen?
Huh.
And it was probably through the mail-in or the computerized process. Maybe I didn't check a box I was supposed to check. I don't know. But that kind of DMV motor voter registration thing, although there might be some goods behind it about getting people voted, or getting people registered to vote, we've now seen some of the bads where we have non-citizens being registered to vote. And well, when it comes to election integrity and the Board of County Commissioners, there's been a group. In fact, my opponent was part of this group who went to the Board of Commissioners and advocated to change election processes within the county, to go to hand counting votes. First and foremost, what I would say as a county commissioner is we have an elected official that controls this, the county clerk. The county clerk, by statute, runs our elections in the county. And as a county commissioner, will never go to the county clerk and say, you need to do this, this, or this. That is not my place. That is not my role. Just like I wouldn't go to the sheriff and tell the sheriff what they need to be doing. That there's an elected official in charge of our elections. And that county clerk has to follow the laws of this this state. Now, you and I might not agree with the laws of this state, but they're there. And if we want to talk about any changes in the way we vote and elect people in Oregon, that's got to be done at the state level. Now, county commissioners, again, we can go talk to our state senators, our state representatives, and say, hey, we want you to lobby our state. But we know we have conservative representatives out here that do that in our state. And like we talked about before, it's controlled by the other side. So the role of the county commissioner in election integrity, I think, is limited, extremely limited, because we have an elected official that Rochelle Long, that's her job. And she has to follow the laws of the state. And I think she does a really good job at communicating with the public if they're willing to listen. She put out statements just in the last 2 weeks regarding these foreign people being registered and that it got caught and they got removed. And they're open and transparent. You can watch election day, week, night. They have cameras in there. You can watch the counting being happened. Now, the idea of going to physically counting. Okay, 70,000 people, 70,000 votes. That's a lot of votes to count. Who's going to count? Do we have, people will say the votes need hand counted. The vote needs hand counted. Okay, are you going to volunteer? And then are you going to be trained for 3 months? And then are you going to take a week to 2 weeks off work to count these votes each and every day as they come in? And I'm not saying that that's not something that's feasible, but it's more nuanced and it's more complicated than just saying we need to hand count our votes. We need to vote in person. Well, we can't vote in person. The laws of our state have us vote by mail. Now, there might be an avenue that says we can set up a polling station, but again, when we start talking about cost and money and the elections and voting is controlled by an elected official in our county, and that's the county clerk. And if we've got issues with that, the first stop is the county clerk's office.
I think maybe where some of that comes from, and it's not necessarily a reflection on our county clerk, but like the last presidential election, 4 a.m, 500,000 votes conveniently showed up in some districts and that, and it just as a voting citizen, it definitely creates cause for concern when every single one of those votes that was missed showed up just for one candidate. You can't tell me that out of 500,000, one or two maybe didn't go to the other guy.
I see where the controversy comes in when you're looking at these big cities, Detroit, Philadelphia, Chicago, and all their, these cities are known for having political corruption
Right.
rampant anyway. And then when we see that happening on our television screens, yeah, of course people are going to draw conclusions and say, and I get the same feeling everybody else does, but on a local level.
Yeah.
I think we have an amazing county clerk, and she does a great job. She's been super informative with all the candidates throughout this election and very open and transparent with the process and how everything works. And if there are those out there that feel that we have issues with our local voting that our county clerk can impact, reach out to our county clerk. I've personally thought she'll answer anybody's questions. She's really good about talking through her job, her mandates, her requirements, the laws and statutes that guide what she must do.
Yeah. No, that's good to know. It is. You got anything else, Dave?
No, very informative, but no, I think I'm good.
All right.
Thank you for your time today.
Yeah. If anybody's interested, reach out. You can text me 541-979-0944. I'll do my best to reply or meet you for coffee. You can go to my website. It's nicholsforcommissioner.com. I have a Facebook page, Elect Andrew Nichols. You can go to any of those. There's lots of information about where I'm at on the issues and who I am. I didn't really talk anything about my background today, but on the last podcast we did.
You covered that word, yeah.
Yeah, and that information's out there. People can find that. But I absolutely encourage citizens, if you're out there, if you got questions for me, or if you think I'm headed in the wrong direction on something, I need input. I want to represent all of you, Klamath County. And again, I thank you for this opportunity to come on here. And what's up, Klamath Falls?
Yeah, no, we enjoyed having you, and thrilled that you were interested in coming back and visiting with us again. And the door's always open, and not just to you, but to any of to your opponent. The door's open to Mr. German, the other interviewer out there. We'd love to have you on the show and talk to you too, and anybody else that's running for an elected position. Um, Reach out. What's or Big Rooster Media at gmail.com.
And if I do get elected, and as I move forward in this thing, if there's big issues facing the county and you guys want to talk about it, call me.
Absolutely.
I'll sit down with you two gentlemen anytime and discuss things facing our county.
Good to know. We appreciate that.
Nice.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I mean, like I said, we started this. I don't know if you want to call it a community service, but we both like Klamath Falls. We both like the community we live in, and this is just a way of trying to our way of contributing something to it. And
And we need that.
it's
I appreciate it.
not always the most informative. Sometimes news is a little slow, but
Yeah.
it's still, even if it's just, hey, Sonic's open. So, but no, again, Andrew, thanks you very much for being on the show. We appreciate you very
Thank
much.
you, gentlemen. I
And
appreciate
wish
it.
you the best. And
Sure.
yeah, we might have to talk again after November.
All right. Sounds good.
All right. Thank you.
See you guys next week.